Our farm workers, rural and GBV activists are embarking on a peace walk in Klapmuts near Stellenbosch in the Western Cape to mark 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. The Ubuntu Rural Women and Youth Movement says women and children in farming and rural communities face additional challenges, including poverty, access to resources and financial reliance on partners, oftentimes perpetrators of GBV. Our reporter Vanessa Poonah and video journalist Lukhanyo Mazantsana are at the Peace Walk. Let's now speak to Vanessa Poonah. Vanessa, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Just talk to us about how well this particular protest or march is attended, and what are the farm workers particularly saying?
Good afternoon to you. I'm struggling to hear you, but let me just give you a sense of what's happening in Klapmuts today. Of course, this is the group of community activists, rural and farm worker activists that have come together today. I started off with a community engagement in Klapmuts. It's a rural area near Stellenbosch in the Western Cape. And speaking to some of them earlier on, just listening to the stories, and really women here are saying that despite South Africa having some of the best legislation in place in terms of protecting women and children against all kinds of violence, including gender-based and sexual violence, unfortunately the reality on the ground is that still too much of this is taking place. I'm joined now by the spokesperson for the Ubuntu Rural Women and Youth Movement, Wendy Pakir. Wendy, very warm good day to you. We've walked almost the length and breadth of the Klapmuts area today. Earlier on you were telling me that the reason you've come together here is because women and children in especially rural and farm worker areas are still bearing the brunt of gender-based violence. Talk to me about the dynamics that makes this so.
Yeah, rural women face multiple burdens because of their marginalization. They're far from towns, they're far from urban centers, they're far from the services that government provide, and that makes them very vulnerable to abuse as well. You know, there's so many issues that women face, multiple burdens and oppressions that women are facing. And when cases go to court, it's so lengthy, cases get postponed time and time again. Women don't have the resources to go to court, they must borrow money to get to these services. And it makes it hard for women, rural women, to access justice.
You were talking to me, Wendy, earlier on specifically around women living on farms, and that is, of course, your organization deals with the plight of people, of farm dwellers, so to speak. You were saying to me oftentimes the husband, for example, will have a place to live on the farm, the house, of course, provided for his family. Oftentimes this person happens to be the perpetrator of gender-based violence. The woman in that situation finds herself practically with nowhere to go. You've mentioned some areas such as Vredendal on the west coast being quite a big hotspot. Speak to us to that.
Yeah, so we often ask ourselves, why do women stay? And when I look at the situation of farm women, they stay because they're dependent on the partner or the husband for the house. They stay because they think of the children. They stay because they've been living on the land for generations to come. And where do they go with their children? And it leaves women in particular vulnerable, in very vulnerable positions. And that's why we make sure that women have housing contract into their own name, so they can make informed decisions when they have to leave or they decide to leave the home. In Vredendal, it's a hotspot for gender-based violence. Just the last month, there were so many women, Lutzville, the surrounding areas, women killed by their intimate partners, young women, a 21-year-old killed on the eve of a 21st birthday by a boyfriend who was released on bail. You know, he came and he's promised a family that he's giving them a greatest gift, and he raped her and he killed her in the vineyard. A baby, a mother with a baby being killed with a harvest beater, and the dad put the baby on the mother's breast while she was already no more. And that's the stories we hear. 8-year-old been raped, a 4-month-old baby been raped in Vredendal. So we come together with stakeholders to say that we can no longer be silent. We can no longer work in our isolation, in our little corners, and think we can do it on our own. If we want to change the face of GBV, if we want to bring the numbers down, we have to work together.
Wendy, there have been amendments to South Africa's, shall we call it, gender-based violence laws, laws around sexual violence, perpetrators, etc. The laws are there. On the ground, though, how difficult is it for these laws to actually reach, the outcomes of these laws that we have in place to actually reach the people? You said earlier on there seems to be a disconnect in terms of women being able to access very good legislation that could protect them. You were talking about women that have had protection orders that have still been killed or violated. Speak to me to that.
Yeah, the laws are there, and we have some of the best laws in the country and also the best constitution in the world, that's what they say. But implementation of the law is sometimes a problem. Sometimes women don't even know about the legislation. They don't know about the amendments. They don't know where to go if their rights are violated. And that's where organizations such as Ubuntu, Mosaic and many others come in, because we provide access to information so that women know where to go. What we found is that sometimes women try to use the law to get a protection order, and we've seen many women being killed despite having the protection order. There's just a disregard for the law, even by the male perpetrators. And we've seen women trying to use the law to protect themselves, but then they're still not safe.
Society then needs to change within homes. You were saying earlier on, it has to start in the home, it has to start in the church, in the mosque, in the temples. It has to start when you hear, for example, the next door neighbor screaming or calling out. It's no longer good enough following the fact to say that, oh, we heard something, a commotion next door. So there is a level of responsibility on each and every individual in South Africa.
Yes, and it starts in our home. Mothers with boys, our boys need to know that no touching is okay. When a girl says no, it's a no. Our mothers need to teach our boys that, and also fathers need to teach our boys that. When girls decide to walk away from a relationship, a boy must know, a young man must know that he has no right to take a life. Who must teach them that? Our mothers and fathers, but there's also a lot of children that grow up out without parents, and that's where we as society come in. When they're in the school, that's where we as the school, as the churches, the formations they belong to, we must teach them these things, because when we look at the statistics, 62% of the sexual crimes happen in the home of the victim or in the home of the perpetrator. It's not strangers, it's people that live in our society, and that's why we can no longer close our eyes and look the other way, because we have a role to play. We can stop gender-based violence, we can change the face of GBV, we can make our community safe by addressing these issues.
Wendy, thank you so much. Of course, speaking to us there, Wendy Pakir, she is the director of the Ubuntu Rural Women and Youth Movement. And of course, I'll step out of shot so that you can see a peace march taking place in the streets of Klapmuts today to mark the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence.